2 Kings 14 and 2 Chronicles 25. Well, we're adding two more kings to our list, one in the north and one in the south. When Joash dies in the north, his son becomes the king. His name is Jeroboam. Now, we often call him Jeroboam the second because we have an earlier Jeroboam here, but same name. He's going to reign for 41 years, a long reign. 41 years. And it's almost as though God is giving the nation of Israel, I would call this story of Jeroboam. It's only 7 verses long in the text, but it's almost like a last chance for Israel to amend their ways when it comes to how they worship. Jeroboam is very successful, it seems. He gains a lot of the land back that they had lost in wars over time. So a very prosperous time for Israel, but again, very wicked. He is following the ways of his forebear, Jeroboam. In the south, when Joash dies, his son, his name is Amaziah. He is also now, again, in the south, said to be a good king, but, in fact, let me read what it says in 2 Chronicles 25:2. He did what was right in the sight of the Lord, but not with a shalom heart. But not with a heart that was shalom or peaceful with Yahweh. In fact, here is how the 2 Kings 14 description runs. Sounds the same. He did what was right in the sight of the Lord, but not like his father David. David is always the theme to be compared to, and Amaziah did not live up to David. In fact, an amazing verse, it's in the Chronicles text, 25:14. Now it was so, after Amaziah, what he did was he went down to Edom and won a war. After he came back from the slaughter of the Edomites, he brought the gods of the people of Seir, set them up to be his gods, and bowed down before them and burned incense to them. So a very shocking end to how Amaziah reigns. And again, I find it interesting that the text of the Bible is willing to give both sides of a man's story. That he did well, he worshipped Yahweh, but, and then an almost opposite kind of a story. Well, let's talk about the prophets which are to come, because the rest of our reading, I mean, we're getting close to the end of the history of Israel, the story of the Old Testament, but we've got a lot of reading to go, and that's because the prophets are coming in our Bible, and let's talk about this. Again, the events of the prophets really are to be read backwards into the period of the kings. It's easy to turn a page and forget that these are all happening with the context of the latter stages of the kingdom of Israel and Judah in play, and even into the exile. So just remember to read backwards. When you come to these prophets and read them, they want to be read within the context of what was happening within Israel and Judah. They're roughly chronological, although our Christian Bibles, for some reason, well, it's because of the size of the book. They're called major prophets and minor prophets in the Christian tradition. Major because Isaiah is long, Ezekiel is long, and Jeremiah is long. And so they take these long books in our tradition and bring them to the front. Whereas really, the other books, the other 12 minor prophets we call them, which are just called that because they're shorter, they seem to have been written on one scroll and passed around ancient Israel, even up to the days of Jesus, as one scroll, but 12 different prophets. So they are all the words of God, as it were. They come with the authority of God behind it. You'll often hear the phrase, "Thus saith the Lord," which is really, and in fact, let's talk about this. The point of these prophets will be whether they're pre-exilic, about the first 10 down to Joel. These will be all during the days preceding the coming of the exile, talking about returning to Yahweh. Some will sound as though it's not too late. We have time to come back to Yahweh, both individually and as a nation. Others will sound like it's too late. You have already made your bed, now it's time to lie in it. These two books here, Ezekiel, Daniel, will be mid-exile in the sense that both of these men will be writing from Persia or Babylon, and these last three will be post-exilic in the sense that they will be talking about the situation of Israel after they come back from the exile. But again, the theme will be to return to Yahweh. There'll be general and specific descriptions of how that is to be done. Interestingly, when we come to Jonah, in fact, that's our next reading, and even Isaiah, the question will be, in the mind of the writer quite often, the relationship of Israel to Gentiles. And, of course, we'll be talking about that specifically in Jonah next time. And here's another important thing. When we come to books like Amos and Micah and Hosea, there will be this sense of social justice that runs the book. But remember where they're aiming their information toward. It's to the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, whose problem is not primarily social justice, it's worship. And here's the point, that bad worship lends to bad justice. Widows and orphans and poor people are not taken care of. Why? Because you're worshiping the wrong deity. So remember to read these books again with general and specific themes in mind that all relate back to the general story again of an Israelite nation who has lost its worship of Yahweh. In fact, let me read the question that I would recommend as we get into the prophets. What is the question that is being asked? Here's how I would say it. How can Yahweh, said to be reigning righteously over the world, and remember, God is claiming this. He's the creator, and he's made this huge promise to the family of Abraham. So how can God, said to be reigning righteously over the world when, number one, Israel has gone into exile? Number two, Israel has been promised a glorious future. And three, this nation of Israel is predicted to return in loyalty to Yahweh. So those will be the three questions that will be asked, as it were, or three parts of one question that will be asked. And notice how we read the Old Testament and how we understand the Old Testament will largely set in motion how we read the New Testament to come.